problem is stinking thinking. Now, with that, I want to go back and give my disclaimer over again. I don't want to offend people with today's Bible study. I don't want to come off as insensitive. However, I do want to challenge some popular thinking. Remember, if we believe a lie, we live the lie. That's what Jesus was teaching when he said, "You shall know the truth will set you free." Free from the lies that we've all been taught, all the lies we embrace, the lies we try to live out in our lives. We want to get rid of those lies and embrace the truth so that our lives will be more productive, more prosperous, more successful. That's the key. Anyhow, let's get into our Bible study today. I want to talk about the chief causes of failure. And I would say that the number one thing that we have to deal with in that area, let me get it up on the board. And we all do this, but the chief cause is we make excuses for our failures. That's one of the biggest problems we all face, excuses. And we're going to look at some of the more popular ones today, and we're going to explore them and explode some of them. And again, I don't want to come off as insensitive. That isn't the goal, although I may. I don't want to. All right, let's get into it. We live in a world that discriminates, number one. We live in a world that discriminates, whether you're in America, Europe, Africa, the Antarctic, it doesn't matter. We live in a discriminatory world. That's just a fact. Some people discriminate on the color of your skin, your gender, your culture, your religion, age. You know, you're too young, you're too old, that kind of stuff. This is all part and parcel of the world that we live in. Some of these are unchangeable. For instance, we're born within a certain race. You know, you're white, you're black, you're Asian, you're red, you're brown, you're yellow, whatever. We're born that. It's unchangeable. The language, our religion, our gender. You can't change your gender. I know it's popular today. We have transgender people. You can only pretend, in my mind, my opinion, to be able to transgender. You're born a male, you're born a female, and you're going to die that way. Now, however, we don't have to accept the belief that these unchangeable things in our life, our race, our gender, and so forth, are responsible for our success or failure. They are not. Being born black doesn't mean you're going to be successful or unsuccessful. Being born in Africa as opposed to America doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful or unsuccessful. Because people will discriminate against you based on whatever doesn't mean or determine whether or not you're going to be successful or unsuccessful. You determine that. That's the key to the scriptures, I believe. Being responsible. Let's move on. People have been discriminating against other groups, religions, and cultures for centuries. It is not a new phenomenon. Governments have attempted to fix it through legislation. The problem, though, is that they're limited, as that legislation, laws can only govern the outward behaviors of us in a society. Laws cannot change the inward belief, the heart of a man or a woman. That's the problem. They cannot address the real problem. Prejudice and hatred come from within. And I would add, they're learned behaviors. They're learned positions in life, if you will. Children are not born with prejudices. You put children together, they don't know that their skin is different. They may know it, but they don't care, or their religion or their gender and so forth. We have a society that teaches these things, which is sad. But the question is, do these things prevent us from being successful? The answer is no. Now let's begin in Jesus' day. There were a group of people that were discriminated against by the Jews in Jesus' day. They were known as Samaritans. Now, to be fair, the Samaritans didn't like the Jews either. The discrimination, if you will, was going both ways, yeah. Why the animosities? The Samaritans, it turns out, it's commonly believed, were considered to be half Jew and half Gentile. through intermarriages during some of the exiles that Israel went through previously. And they married Gentiles, and they produced children that were not Jewish, but not Gentile. And the interesting thing is, the Samaritans developed their own version of the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible. They developed their version. They also worshipped on Mount Gerizim rather than Jerusalem. The Jews worshipped in Jerusalem, the Samaritans on Mount Gerizim. Now this becomes apparent in an incident that takes place in the scriptures. I want to take you to that passage here. It's in Luke chapter 9, verses 51 through 56. I'll read it to you. And it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, Jesus we're talking about, he set his face to go to Jerusalem and sent messengers before his face, and they went and entered into a village of the Samaritans. So now we have Jewish disciples of Jesus in a village in Samaria to make ready for him. And they did not receive him because his face was as though he would go to Jerusalem. Remember, they worshipped on Mount Gerizim. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, wilt thou command that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did? His disciples were so outraged by this discriminatory practice. They wouldn't receive Jesus because he was a Jew. He's going to Jerusalem. That was the tip-off. So they said, well, Lord, how about we just bring down fire and kill them all? But he turned and rebuked them and said, you don't know what manner of spirit you are, for the Son of Man has not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. Notice the attitude of Jesus. They wanted to hurt these people. They wanted to, tit for tat, if you will, pay them back. Jesus was saying to them, move on. Let it go. People discriminate against people. That's the way it is in this world. And that's why I have this title, So What? Move on. Look, Jesus had a so what attitude. Jesus did not allow their treatment of him to change him. And this is revealed in the next chapter of Luke, chapter 10. Here we read about an encounter Jesus had with a Jewish lawyer. Notice, this is the very next chapter, by the way. Notice the twist that takes place in this story. It's really amazing. Let me read it to you. He was asked about eternal life, and Jesus gives him an example. He's speaking to this Jewish lawyer. But he, willing to justify himself, the lawyer, said unto Jesus, who is my neighbor then? Because it says, love God and love your neighbor. Who's my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his clothing and wounded him and left, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and then passed by on the other side. Now stop for a moment. The priest and the Levite are both Jews. Jesus is giving this example. So here's this man beat up, bloodied, left for dead on the side of the road. And it just happens, a priest comes upon him, sees him, goes to the other side of the road. He doesn't render any aid. The next one that comes along is a Levite. He looks at this bloodied, near-death man. He also goes to the other side of the road. He doesn't offer to help him. Let's continue. But a certain Samaritan, you get the connection so far? Right? A certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the next day when he left, he took out 2 pence, gave it to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever you spend more, when I come again, I'll repay you. Which now of these 3 do you think was the neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, he that showed mercy unto him. And Jesus said unto him, go and do thou likewise. Notice the twist. Right after the Samaritans rejected Jesus, chapter 9, in the very next verse, Jesus gives an illustration of who the neighbor is. And who was the hero in this story? The Samaritan. In fact, we get that phrase today, being a good Samaritan. It comes from this story. It's anyone who sees their fellow creature in need and stops and helps them, despite the color of their skin, their gender, their culture, their religion, whatever. The Samaritan believed differently than Jesus did. He believed differently than the priest or the Levite. It doesn't matter. God does not want us to discriminate against each other. Not what God wants. Anyway, the conflict between the Jews and the Samaritans can be understood as a picture of the human tendency to create divisions and barriers based on skin color, gender, culture, and religious differences. God is teaching us, trying to teach us, to go beyond these artificial barriers. All they do is serve to separate us. They're not godly. Let's continue. This is important. If God accepts us as we are, we need to accept ourselves and others for who we and they are. Their skin color, gender, culture, religion, so forth, doesn't matter. When others reject you, remind yourself that your success, worth, or value isn't not found in the color of your skin, gender, culture, etc. It's found in the fact that you're a human being. We need to pay attention to that. That's vital. Look at this. Let me jump ahead here. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote something that was very provocative in his day. In his day, the Romans didn't like the Jews didn't like the Romans, the Samaritans didn't like the Jews didn't like the Samaritan. I could go on and on. Look what Paul writes in Galatians 3:28. There's neither Jew, nor Gentile, nor slave, nor free, nor is there male and female, for you're all one in Christ Jesus. I could almost summarize by saying, don't discriminate based on these things. The only thing God cares about is good and evil, in the simplest terms, if you will. And by the way, Jesus had to deal with bias on several levels. In fact, as I've studied the scripture over the years, I was surprised to see how many strikes Jesus had against him from the start. Any of these could have stopped many people from becoming successful today. However, Jesus overcame and completed his mission. And we'll look at some of them right now. I want to take a few moments. Let's start with the fact that he was a Jew in a time when the Jews were looked down upon. So if Jesus had a reason to fail or to give up, this would have been a major one. Listen, the Jews had a tenuous relationship with the Romans. The Romans had expelled Jews from Rome on several occasions. The Apostle Paul mentions one of these expulsions. Now, I mentioned this. The Jews have been the focus over the centuries of various governments trying to get rid of the Jews. We know the Holocaust that took place in Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s, and they were trying to, quote unquote, cleanse Germany, Europe actually, of the Jews, and they wanted to expel them. This is not new. The Romans did this several times. Listen at this. It's in Acts 18, 1 through 4. After this, Paul left Athens, Greece, went to Corinth, and there he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius was the emperor of Rome, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. They expelled them. Why? Discrimination. It's just because they were Jews. Not because they were evil or thieves or murderers. They were just Jews. Amazing. Anyway, despite the obvious prejudice Jesus encountered with the Romans, Jesus pursued his ministry because he believed he had a so what attitude about the Romans' disdain for the Jews. He went beyond their discrimination against him and the Jews and continued to focus on his mission. Now put that in your head as we move on. This is important. And as an aside, we know the hatred for Jewish people exists today. For no other reason we have in the Middle East today Hamas, and we have Hezbollah, and we have the Houthis, and for no other reason that they hate the Jews. They're trying to destroy the nation, to kill the people, for no other reason. God doesn't want that in the hearts of his people. He doesn't want that. Now, let's move on. I put this in here. My skin colors hold me back. So what? I don't get as many opportunities because I'm black or I'm Asian or I'm Indian. So what? That may be true. That may be the case. And again, I'm not trying to be insensitive. I recognize that discrimination still exists today in the hearts of some people. That's a fact. It's always going to be with us. And what's our answer to that? So what? I'm not going to allow that to stop me from pursuing my dream, my goal. I don't want that to happen. Let's go on. Some people use their physical appearance as an excuse for their failure. Specifically, they believe their skin color holds them back from getting a fair shake in life. If you wait for a fair shake in life, you're going to be disappointed. Why? Because there will always be people who judge others on their skin color, culture, gender, or religion. Even Jesus didn't get a fair shake in this regard. In fact, everything about his birth and childhood worked against him. Do you know that Jesus, you might recall, was born in Nazareth, a little town? The town was in Galilee. The Galilee was looked down upon even by Jews in his day, especially the Romans. And worse, Nazareth was considered a podunk town, probably only 500 or 600 people at the time. It was considered to be backward. Today we would consider people from Nazareth, some people say, well, they're hillbillies, quote unquote. We all know that's a derisive term, so I just want you to understand that. That was a strike against him, but it didn't affect Jesus. Look at this one. Jesus was physically unattractive. So your skin color, you think that's going to, listen to this. He possessed nothing that would physically attract people to him. Look what the prophet Isaiah wrote about Jesus. Who has believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, as a root out of a dry ground. In other words, his beginnings were not very auspicious. They are not very good. So he has no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there's no beauty that we should desire him. Continuing, the prophet wrote, he's despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Well, how's that for a beginning in a ministry? How's that for beginning in life? You want to be successful? You don't even look good? Don't use your physical attributes as an excuse to fail. God doesn't buy it. His own son had problems with his physical attributes. You know there's no physical description of Jesus other than this one? And this one is not very attractive, not very complimentary. Despite being part of a minority group like Jesus, he was a Jew, and being physically unattractive, Jesus focused on the mission. He did not use this as an excuse for failure. This is what I'm trying to teach on today. All these so-called excuses, reasons why we can't try, why we can't succeed, why we didn't get a break for this, and why life was unfair. That's the way it is. Most of us are not born into wealth or have a silver spoon in our tongue, as they say. That's just not the way it is. Here's a good one. I was born poor. So what? I was born poor. Hal Ballou was born into a poor family in Parkside Projects. In fact, I didn't know how poor we were until I went to junior high school. Why? Because everybody in Parkside was poor. So everybody I hung around with and played with, we were all poor. We were all in the same mess. And so it never occurred to me that we were poor. But when I went to junior high school, I met kids who lived in houses, homes. Their dads had cars. They had televisions. We didn't. I didn't have a television, I think, until I was probably 10 or 12. And my dad got a car later in my life. Well, I was probably 8 or 10. at the time. We didn't have those things. But when I got to junior high school, I saw they had nice clothes. They had homes, cars, television. And then it dawned on me, hey, we're poor. We're poor. What an enlightening moment that was. Well, I guess I could have used that as an excuse to stay poor. After all, I didn't get any breaks when I was a kid, growing up poor. You know what? Jesus grew up poor. Now, people get this mixed up. Let me stop and correct something. Remember the Christmas pageants where the three wise men are there and they're giving gold and incense and myrrh, all these wonderful gifts. They're very rich. The Magi probably didn't appear until a couple of years after his physical birth. We know that because I think it was Herod who calls them in, and he discovers this happened a couple of years earlier, and so he sends out a decree, kill all the Jewish male babies 2 years old and under. He's trying to catch Jesus in this net to kill Jesus. So at the time of Jesus' birth, they didn't have the gold and incense and myrrh. Here's what they had. Nothing. Let me read it to you. Talking about Mary. First of all, the law required, when a young child was circumcised, a 1-year-old lamb as a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for the sin offering. Lamb, pigeon, turtle dove. Here's what it reads. When the days of her purification are completed for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the doorway, this is for the woman, I'm sorry, not Mary, but any woman, of the tent of meeting, a 1-year-old lamb as a burnt offering, a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering. Then he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who gives birth to a child, whether male or female. And then it goes on. But if she cannot afford a lamb, i.e., that is, if she's poor, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves, the one as a burnt offering and the other as a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Leviticus 12, 6-8. So there was an exception in the law. If you were poor, if you couldn't afford the lamb, then God will accept this. Well, let's read on. Here's the story of Joseph and Mary after the birth of Jesus and the circumcision. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcision of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was so named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And when the days of her purification according to the law of Moses were accomplished, we just read what was required, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male that opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Luke 2:21-24. They didn't offer a lamb. Why? They probably didn't have one. They were poor. But Jesus, beginning in poverty, doesn't use that as an excuse. Don't look back at your past and pluck out excuses for future failure. That's stinking thinking. You got to get rid of that. Look at this. In the wealthiest nation on earth, which is that? Which nation is that? America. Over 11% of its citizens are poor. 11%. Some people use poverty as an excuse for not getting the breaks to succeed. I've met those people. Well, I was born poor. We were on welfare. We were on welfare when I was a kid. My dad hated it. My mom had to sneak around to do it. Yeah, Chris is waving at herself. Yeah. Many men and women who were born poor became successful. I would argue that the greater poverty that we experience is of the mind, not the physical poverty, but the mental poverty. The negative mindset that blames everyone and everything for their failures. That's the worst kind of poverty. Now, here's one. I might get into trouble on this one. Yeah. I was born handicapped. My opportunities are limited. So what? Here's Moses' handicap. Interesting. Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I'm not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant. I'm slow of speech and a slow tongue. Moses may have actually had a disability. He may have been a stutterer, or some might have been tongue-tied. We don't know. But he's trying to make an excuse for not being used. Oh, you know what, Lord? I've got a problem with my speech, so you may not want to consider. No, God didn't look at that. God pressed Moses into service despite this. And what God does is he chooses someone. Notice what he does. He chooses someone to help Moses. And that's what we do. When you're disabled some way, you find something to help you. I have a neighbor, a young man in a wheelchair. I think he has multiple sclerosis. No? Something more devastating than that. It's very, very devastating. He's in the university studying. I think he's working toward a PhD. His mother drives him to the university and back. He doesn't use that as an excuse. He found a way to offset that disability and pursue his dream. That's what God is showing us here by saying, you know what, Aaron's going to become your mouthpiece. But we're not going to give up on you, Moses, because you have a disability. Don't let that become an excuse. Look, has anybody here heard of Helen Keller? She was born deaf and blind. She couldn't see or hear. What in the world are you going to... She chose to step out of this endless line of mediocrity and self-pity. She wouldn't allow that to become an excuse. She was the first blind person to earn a bachelor's degree. She went on to become involved in all kinds of groups and so forth, and she became an author. She helped improve the Braille system for the blind. This woman is a hero in that sense. She refused to allow her disability to become an excuse for failure. Instead, she did what God did with Moses. She found those ways for someone to help her and offset the negativity of the disability and move on. My goodness. My God. How did she accomplish so much? I just can't believe it. Disabilities do not disqualify people from becoming successful. God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. And that's important. Well, here's one here. I think some of you may really associate with this. Women do not get the same opportunities as men. So what? Yes, it's true. We're still at that point where there's some gender discrimination, even in America. Certainly in some Middle Eastern countries, women there have a very hard road to hoe. I mean, it's really, really difficult for them. But look what happens in the scriptures. And I'm reading in Luke 10:38 through 42. Now it came to pass as they went that they entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him, Jesus, into her house. And she had a sister called Mary. So now we have Mary and Martha and Jesus, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving and came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her, therefore, that she should help me. So here's the situation. Jesus comes. He's at the house. Apparently, he's teaching the men in the house. And so Mary, she gets into that room and sits down. Martha is taking care of preparing food and so forth. And Martha looks in and sees Mary and says, well, wait a minute, Mary. You're supposed to be out here with the women and doing the women's stuff. So she makes an appeal to Jesus, thinking Jesus is going to tell her sister, Mary, get up and get going. Because that was the culture of that day. And had Jesus abided by the culture of that day, he would have indeed instructed Mary, get up. This is teachings for men. Get up and go and help your sister. He doesn't. Listen to this. Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, you're so careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful. And Mary has chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Oh, what a twist. Jesus and the disciples are going to Jerusalem. They stop at Mary and Martha's home. She's preparing the meal. Jesus begins to teach. Mary joins them and sits at the feet and listens. Martha's preparing the meal. Martha becomes upset with her sister. She does all the work. And Mary's sitting on the floor doing nothing to help. Mary complains to Jesus. Well, I think the thing that I find interesting here isn't Martha so much, or Mary and Martha. I think what's interesting is that Mary did not allow her gender. She didn't use it as an excuse not to sit among the men, which she could have, because the culture at that time, the prevailing culture, that was a no-no. Jesus taught in these small gatherings, the men would be there, but not the two women that were the hosts in the house. Mary didn't care. She did not allow her gender to stop her from being taught by the master. She didn't allow it to stop her from going beyond the cultural traditions of the day, or discriminations, if you will. You see the point here? No excuses. I was born a woman. So what? That's God's. God's opinion is, so what? You're born a woman. Don't let that stop you. Not an excuse. Martha was fulfilling the expected role of a woman in Jesus' day, preparing meals, cleaning the house, and so forth. They were second-class citizens in that day. Mary, however, stepped out of the cultural role for women and decided to join the men and sit as a pupil at the feet of Jesus. Mary went against the norms of her day, and Jesus approved. I find that really interesting. Importantly, Jesus didn't invite Mary to sit there, nor does it appear he encouraged her. It appears Mary did this on her own. She decided she was not going to let her gender hold her back. No excuses. As a result, she was taught by Jesus. What I wouldn't give to have Jesus pop into this Bible study, I wouldn't be up here. I'd be on the floor listening, taking notes. That's what I would be doing. Well, how do we overcome the built-in societal and cultural prejudices? First, we recognize that society isn't likely to become fair, suddenly fair and equitable. There's just something in the hearts of men and women. We like to look down on somebody, a group. We like to think we're above somebody somehow, no matter how small the group or whatever. We want to be above, on top. What we believe, whether true or false, will determine in considerable measure the level of success we achieve. How then can we overcome the obstacles? The answer is found in the scriptures. Change the way you think. Change what you believe. That's what these Bible studies, and my teaching ministry has always been focused on helping people get rid of the stinking thinking. Help people go beyond the lies that have been put into our heads, that we've embraced through our lives, if you will. The answer is found in the scriptures. Change the way you think, what you believe. If you want to go beyond the negative circumstances you were born into, whatever those negative circumstances may be, you must choose to change your beliefs and habits and pursue the goals. David Brinkley, he was an old news commentator, well respected many years ago. You young people probably don't know who he was. He wrote, quote, "A successful man is one who can lay a firm foundation with the bricks others have thrown at him," end quote. Yeah, throw some more bricks, because I'm still building. They take the criticisms and they learn from them. They take their failures, they learn from them, but they stay focused on their success goals. And they don't allow themselves the luxury of making excuses for their failure. Here are some things that I want you to pay attention to in our Bible study today. Everybody still attention? Good. God encouraged, beware of your comfort zone. We all have it. We all get in the comfort zone. God encouraged Joshua and the men of Israel to conquer their enemies. Remember, they were coming through the 40 years, to the end of the 40 years in the wilderness, and they're going to go conquer the enemy. They were not used to warfare. They hadn't fought a battle basically for many, many years, decades. Having been in the desert for 40 years, understandably, they would be afraid to go into the land. So here's what God said to Joshua. Haven't I commanded you? So the order came from God. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. What is the comfort zone? I put it in your notes. It's the place where habits govern our lives. I should do another Bible study on the self. In the scriptures, when it uses the word themselves, the word self is auto in the Greek. And we get automatic from that. So the self is that part of us that lives automatically. We just live off of habits. Even though some of our habits are bad, counterproductive. So we have to deal with this. We all have comfort zones at home and work. In the comfort things, we do things by habit, and there's no risk of failure, no challenge to grow or improve. That's the key. There's no risk of failure, no challenge to grow or improve. It's life at its easiest in the comfort zone. It offers a sense of security, but it also limits our personal growth and development. Why? In the comfort zone, individuals tend to avoid the challenges, the risks, and thereby missing opportunities to expand their horizons and improve their lives. It is essential to recognize that staying in the comfort zone, and I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to get to one of our major comfort zones in just a moment. Recognize that staying in the comfort zone can hinder progress and prevent one from reaching their full potential. Embracing discomfort and stepping outside your comfort zone is essential for growth and achieving greater things. Period. Remember, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. Now let's talk about the comfort zone. Number one, I want to encourage you in your comfort zone, make time to get out of your comfort zone. Now, let's look at this. It takes time and effort to realize change in your life. It's not done easily or quickly. There's always resistance to change in your life, especially positive change. It's amazing. It seems easier to get a bad habit than to develop a good one. It's amazing. That's why it's essential to redeem the time or use our time wisely. Making time to study the Word of God, attending Bible studies, church fellowship, and so forth. This should be one of the priorities in our lives. It is here in the scriptures that we will learn who we were meant to be and how we were meant to live our lives. Devoting time to this is vital. Psalm 90, verse 12, quote, "Teach us to number our days that we might gain a heart of wisdom," end quote. Teach us to number our days. Look, when you're young, your mind plays a little trick on you, and it masks the fact that you're going to die one day. So you live a little dangerously. You do some foolish things. You're not real, hey, this could kill me. But it's different when you get older. The closer I get to my end, the more I'm aware of it. I don't think the same way today that I thought when I was 25. I'll guarantee you that. Teach me, Lord. Teach me to pay attention to my lifetime, how much time I have, that I might incline my mind to you. Why? No matter how long we live, it's always too short. We're all on a clock. Now today, we're faced with a time paradox. That's what I call it. Here's the paradox. We have technology that both saves our time and wastes our time. That's right. That phone in your hand, it's a time saver. It's also a time waster. It's paradoxical. It's ironic. We have to learn to manage that thing. That thing will devour you. It will devour your life, your time. You can't get it back. Look, smartphones have become our window into the entire world. With them, we can reach out to our family and friends instantly. Right now, you're watching me on Facebook instantly. It's amazing. We can get answers to questions. Hey, Google, what's the temperature going to be? And somebody will answer you. We hold business meetings virtually, receive emails, text messages, photos in an instant. The idea behind the smartphone is to make our lives better and easier and to give us more free time. That's the goal of the smartphone. It doesn't work because of the paradox. The paradox is this. While our smartphones save us time, instead of using that time wisely, we end up doing more things on those smartphones. Instead of using our quiet time for dreaming or imagining, we fill the time by doing more on our phones, task lists, playing games, watching YouTube things. One of the things that we do is we kill time. I put that in quotes. We kill time. You're killing part of your life by doing mindless things on them. I see people, especially a lot of young people, although it's getting to be older people. I'm at the mall. They've got their heads down looking at their phone while they're walking. And then you can see they're texting and they're hitting and they're scrolling and they're wiping and they're doing this and they've got their thumbs going. And I think to myself, you're going to walk into a glass wall here in a moment if you're not careful. You're not even aware of your surroundings. That phone has you. It owns you. And people, how much time do you spend on those foolish games they want you to play so they can slip in ads? Today, the concept of free time is becoming a thing of the past. We need to think. We need time to think and reflect. We need time to simply sit down and do nothing. We need that time. We need to divorce ourselves from those smartphones from time to time. We have to do it if we're going to plan for a better future. Surprisingly, research suggests that people who use social media, quote, often feel a sense of guilt and shame and regret by filling their free time online. Holy smoke. They feel guilt and shame, but they don't change. Guilt is not a good motivator. It doesn't make people change. It's an excuse. And look, it's proven right here. They feel guilt, but they don't change. Watch this. Think of what you could do with all that time. Visit family, friends, dream, finish a project, get a trade. How about a degree? The scriptures teach us to be mindful of our days. Here are the facts. You ready? You're sitting down? 4.88 billion people own a smartphone today. By 2028, that number will reach 5.83 people. Almost everybody on the planet will have a smartphone. I can call my friend in India right now and say, hi, how you doing? Or I can FaceTime them. You know, we can see each other. What a great tool. No, not always. Listen to this. The average user spends 3 hours and 45 minutes on their phones each day. Americans spend more time, 5 hours and 16 minutes a day. Now, if you sleep 8, right? If you sleep 8, that leaves you 16. You're using a third of that on a phone. What are we doing to ourselves? I'll tell you what we're doing to ourselves. We're ruining our lives. 5 hours and 16 minutes a day. If you're Generation Z, that means if you were born between 1997 and 2012. When were you born? Huh? 02. So you're Generation Z. Yeah, you're both Generation, so are you. You spend 6 hours and 27 minutes on the phone each day. 6.5 hours doing this and looking down. When you do that, you don't have any time to dream. You're stealing your own time on this so-called help. We have some rules in our house. When we sit down for a meal, does it show you how many hours you're on there? How many?
1 hour and 4 minutes.
So far.
No, that's my daily average.
How many?
1 hour and 4 minutes.
Oh, I love you. Good man. When we sit down for a meal, no phones are allowed. And you'd be amazed at how often we're tempted because you hear that little beep. Oh my God, I got a message. Well, it's not the end of the world. It's probably somebody saying, hey, what are you doing? Or I love you. Or they send an emoji with a smile or some other thing you don't even recognize. You got to answer. You got to respond. I love you too. Nuts. We need time to dream. Remember, everybody dreams when they're asleep. Everybody dreams when they're asleep. But successful people dream when they're awake. But to do that, you got to make time. Yes.
My average time is double his.
Yes. No kidding. Time. Smartphones. Don't get me started. I'll start preaching. All right, let's move on. Beware of the majority. Beware of the majority. I want you to shut everything down for a moment and envision the following. Because the majority often is wrong. The majority called for the death of Jesus Christ. Instead of releasing Barabbas, The majority called for Jesus had called for the release of Barabbas, a known convicted thief, a murderer. This guy was a bad guy, but they wanted Jesus to be killed. They were wrong, but that's what happened. Beware the majority. Look, imagine you see a line of people. I want you to focus. Look at me for a moment. Look at me for a moment. They're all checking their smartphones to see how many hours they're on the phone. Get off your smartphones. There's Bible study going on, and they're on their smartphones checking their time. I can't believe it. I'm going to throw stuff at you in a moment. Focus. Up here. No phone. Imagine you are in a line, 4 abreast, and you're in this line, and you look ahead, and the line ahead of you stretches for a block or so. There's probably 20, 30, 40 lines of 4 ahead of you. But as you peek around the corner, you look around the person there, and you look ahead, you see they're all walking toward the edge of a cliff. And they're mindlessly falling over the cliff, 4 at a time. And you think to yourself, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of the mob, the majority who has a mindless, aimless life. So you step out. You get out of the line. Oh boy, here it comes. Hey, what are you doing? Get back in line. Who do you think you are? I want a different life. I want to be successful. Get back in line. You're not any different than us. Oh, yeah, I am. I think differently. No, get back in line. The pressure's on. The pressure's on. You're going to feel a little alone because the majority of people are in that line. Why? It takes time and energy and effort to develop good habits. It takes time to think, to imagine, to dream. You can't do those things on that phone, on that computer. You have to set aside time, and you only have a limited amount of time. Lord, teach me to mark my time here, that I might incline my heart to your word, to you, Lord. It's amazing. Get back in line. No, your future isn't in the majority, trust me. They have got all the excuses for failure down pat. They can flip that excuse. Well, I'm a drug addict. I'm not responsible for me. I can't help myself. It's a medical disease. And on they go. I'm from this country and I don't get a break. I didn't get a break the time before. I didn't get... Stop. So what? You think you're the only person that was struggling because you're a woman or your skin was black or that you were born in poverty? You're not. I'm going to break it to you. You're not. Finally, don't be stopped by failure, fear of failure. Why do I say that? You're going to fail. You are going to fail. It's part of the price you pay for success. Enjoy, embrace it. Don't go into it thinking, well, I'm going to plan failure. No, but when it comes, you think to yourself, well, what did I learn from it? How can I improve? What should I do differently? Don't sit down and, oh, wow, I'm such a failure. No! It's just an excuse. Here, number 1, seek out mentors. Hang around men and women who have failed all the way to success. And pick their brains from time to time. Hey, Grandpa, when you had that gas station and then you suddenly lost blah, 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 what did you do? Oh, you know grandpas and grandmas love to tell stories? Yeah. All you got to do is turn the dial up a little bit and boy, they're gone. In fact, sometimes you have to shut them up. That's the way it is. But you're not going to have those mentors forever. Why? We're all on a time clock. And when my time expires, you're not going to be able to sit down with Grandpa. Find some mentors, godly men and women. Become friendly with them. And from time to time, sit down with them. I mean, why repeat their failures when you can learn from them, right? Use your Bible in seeking, let me read this. This has to do with mentors. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Proverbs 15:22. I love that. Choose godly people as mentors and friends. And remember, not everybody wants you to succeed. They want you to get back in that line. Beware. Spend some time in your Bible. James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and will be given to you. Set goals. This is necessary. The goal provides a roadmap of where we begin and where we are and where we want to go to. They give our life structure, help us develop new and better habits when we have goals. It's really important. Now, just quickly, the goal needs to be moral and achievable. Don't set a goal, by this time tomorrow I'm going to lose 40 pounds. Not going to happen. But you could say, this time next year I want to have lost 20 pounds, right? It's achievable. Or I want to do this with my finances. I want to save, in 6 months I want to set aside, I want to save $300. Especially for those who quote unquote, I can't save a nickel. Yeah, I can't. Why don't you just say it properly? Instead of saying I can't, why don't you own up to it and be responsible and say, I won't save a nickel. See the difference in the mindset? I can't do that. I won't do that. I used to tell women, they would come in for counseling, I just can't put up with it any longer. I said, no, you have put up with it for the last 10 years, and you're going to continue until you learn to say, I won't put up with it. See? One is, I'm a victim. I can't. The other one is, I'm a victor. I can. And I won't allow that in my life anymore. Take responsibility. Set goals. And make them manageable. Make them achievable. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Yeah. So make plans, set goals, and finally be patient. Remember my teaching on how to eat an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And when you get done in a year or so, you're going to have saved that money, lost that weight, gotten that new job, gone to school, enrolled in a new program, whatever it may be. Life can change, but you got to set goals. When I set goals for my education, I'm only 2 out of 7 that ever went to completed a university degree. I have an older brother who has a law degree. I have a master's. But I didn't do it all at once. I thought, because I have a confession to make, I wasn't sure I could be successful at school. My wife, Christine, will tell you. In fact, when I got to my master's program, I was really unsure. So the first semester, I only took 1 class. I wasn't sure I was capable of doing a master's level work. It was just me. So what did I do? I set a small goal, and I achieved it. In fact, the first class, I remember a woman who had already gotten her master's. She was set in for Dr. Brown, who was ill, and she said, if there's one thing you're going to learn in this program, this master's program, is how to use a library. And she said that 3 or 4 times. I kept thinking to myself, it's not library, it's library. I went home that night and told Chris I can do this program. She said, you can? Oh my good, great, good for you. Why do you say that? And I told her the story. I know somebody who has this master's degree and she doesn't even know how to say library. I've got this. Motivated. I broke it down. I got a 2-year degree, then I got my bachelor's at Madonna, and then I got my master's at Oakland University. That's how you do it. And once you get it, they can't take it away from you. Yes, you can do it if you get rid of the excuses. You get rid of blaming others. If you get rid of excusing whatever circumstance you find yourself in. Come on, let's go. Move on. Anyway, how to knead an elephant. Here's the scripture, Galatians 6 and 9. Let us not be weary in doing good. And apply that to developing a new habit in life, a good one. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. When you plant those seeds, developing that new habit, it takes time for it to germinate. It takes time to see that little bud spring up. But sooner or later, it's going to be the full ear of corn. And it says here, you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. Galatians 6 and 9. All these negative things could be excuses. Poverty, race, gender, religion, culture, they're all beyond our control. Most of them are. They're beyond our control. You're born into a Catholic faith or Lutheran or whatever. You're born black or white or red or brown. It's beyond your control. Your culture, It's beyond your, that's what you're born into, like Jesus. But don't let that become, any of those things become an excuse for failure in your life. Put all that behind you and move on. The good things about your ethnicity, your culture, or your faith, whatever, embrace those. But the things that you don't care for or whatever, there are things in my life I don't care for, my childhood. I moved on from them. I don't live there in here. I moved on. When I say moved on, not geographically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I moved on. And you can too, if you choose to. If you choose to. We determine our end for better or worse. And finally, learning is a process, an experience. It doesn't come simply by being alive. Neither time nor experience teaches us by themselves. We must become and remain students in life, about life, if we're able to learn life's most valuable lessons. Thanks for giving me 60 minutes of your day today. I appreciate it. That wraps up this Bible study. I want to make my usual plea. If you enjoy it, if you're profited by it, if you think somebody else might be blessed by it, please share it. Hit that share button. That's important. And secondly, if you have a comment, feel free. I read all the comments. I love to hear from the people, especially when I see a thumb that's facing this way as opposed to a thumb facing that way. So I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, March 30th. We'll be here Sunday at 12 noon. God bless you.